I'm encouraging everyone to consider getting on the field and not sitting on the sidelines. You're already doing the work. And because I'm preaching to the choir, we not only do we have to sing louder, we need to get other voices to join us and sing. It's not the fact that people don't like politics. People don't know. When we go knock on people's doors, people don't know who their legislators are. Even when I tell them that I'm coming to their door to talk to them, just to let them know who their senator is, who their rep is, and giving them information, people are appreciative of that, just to be a part of the process. So what do we need to do? We need to make sure that people understand what's taking place. And it doesn't have to be me, it could be you. Here's what you can expect the next legislative session. And a lot of people are not talking about. And this is at the top of my list on every group that I speak to, and that's redistricting. Redistricting is about to happen in this next legislative session. We will add a 28th congressional seat for the November 2022 midterm election that will be created by the majority, my majority colleagues during the 2022 legislative session. Florida gained 2.7 million residents during the decade, according to the Bureau, and is one of 6 states that will add a new congressional district in 2022. And so Florida also increased in electoral votes from 29 to now 30, which a lot of people don't even know that has just occurred. When we're talking about advocacy, we should be making sure that our message going across the board is talking about fair districting, right? And calling it out as we see it every single time. We're going to have to make sure that we're fighting for that, making sure your representatives and your senators, that they're coming back to the people to talk about what does that process look like, right? And engaging people in what that looks like.
So the first one we'll talk about is House Bill 1. This is the anti-protest bill. I think is very famous by now.
As we know, is it preempts local governments from reducing police budgets to invest into other public safety measures. So it's a complete preemption bill in that it prohibits local governments from acting in that way. It has new enhanced new penalties and criminal penalties that are essentially really broad definitions of what it means to have a violent protest, and it's not actually violent. It enhances different penalties, including protecting Confederate monuments. Now, damaging a memorial with more than $250 in repairs is a second-degree felony, for example. And it includes a lot of other really problematic and just inherently racist policies. And this was the governor's top priority. And it did pass, and then he signed it into law. But this was effective immediately upon becoming law. So this current, Cuban uprising we have that we're witnessing on the streets in Miami really demonstrates the inherent racism and hypocrisy of this bill and this law. And that is, in a nutshell, House Bill 1. And Lynn, I see your comment. It absolutely does make it harder to march freely without incident. So that to me is one of the scariest things about this is the impact of folks that don't know it's even law, right? And so it's really important that we continue to organize and protect our folks when we organize protests and educate folks on your rights while this is still law. And of course, we hope that the courts will strike it down. So we had some really important steps forward, but then also some really bad steps back when it comes to housing justice. Our eviction expungement bill, filed by Representative Vance Lupus, a Republican in Miami, and by Senator Jones, who will be joining us later, passed the Florida House unanimously. This was the first time we've put this bill forward. It was inspired directly by members of the Florida Housing Justice Alliance. So big win that this bill passed the Florida House unanimously. It passed every committee unanimously, but it did not move in the Florida Senate. So a big goal for next session is to pass this bill in both chambers. And essentially this would allow second chances for tenants who are evicted and who have gone through the process to be able to have their records expunged so that it doesn't haunt them in their next lease or in other, for access to credit cards and jobs and all those other pieces, right? The PowerPoint also shows a lot of other really great bills that were filed around housing that were also bipartisan. That was a really positive sign to see a lot of our bills have bipartisan support, but unfortunately they did not move except for that eviction expungement bill. And then one of the most infuriating things that happened was that the legislature cut the Sadowski Affordable Trust Fund permanently by 50%. And the quick overview of that, and I think a lot of folks on this call already know the history of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. But it comes from a tax on new home purchases, and these dollars are supposed to go towards building more affordable housing, which also helps developers, right, and people. And it's definitely not the perfect solution to our housing crisis, but supply is a part of that solution. And generally, when that fund is not stolen to pay for other things, it's upwards of $300 million. Sometimes in this case, it would have been over $400 million. It depends on the housing market. And so what they did is that they permanently cut the money of that fund that goes towards housing to $200 million. And all the excess will go towards other measures around resiliency and climate resiliency. But one of those projects is to essentially provide tax breaks to weatherize beachfront property. So basically, they stole from affordable housing to pay for folks with beachfront housing to weatherize their homes. The original proposal was actually to cut the affordable housing to $160 million. So we actually pushed them to get to $200 million, but our demand was to fully fund it. But they did, increase from their original proposal. So the Florida Realtors have announced a ballot initiative by petition to basically override this law and to fully fund the Sadowski Affordable Trust Fund. This is an effort for years that was led by Black women and Black mamas, including so many doulas that are from y'all's region, and I'm sure y'all have worked with. And so we were able to secure a Medicaid extension for postpartum, so new mothers. Originally, before we passed this bill into law, it was 60 days that after pregnancy you had Medicaid. Now we've extended that to 12 months. And though we still have not passed Medicaid expansion, which, by the way, would be not only cover more people than the postpartum Medicaid extension, but would also be more cost effective for the state. But we still have not passed Medicaid expansion. The governor has officially signed every single bill into law and vetoed the ones he was going to veto. And he did not veto any of these climate preemption bills. And there were several that were filed, all filed, with the sort of support and blessing of the natural gas industry, utility companies. And this is simply part of a national trend to essentially by utility companies and the natural oil and gas industry to erase local progress we've been making towards addressing the climate crisis.
One preempts local governments essentially from implementing a lot of their climate action plans, particularly around gas, like natural gas. There were just a few economic justice bills that we were advocating for. One was the commercial rent stabilization for struggling small businesses due to COVID. Others were eliminating fines and fees, or reforming the practice around fines and fees for drivers. Others were around licensing and workforce reentry for returning citizens. But all of these ended up dying in committee and most in the Senate Appropriations Committee. But we had 27 bills that we advocated for. We had 5 kind of harmful losses around climate, HB1, Sadowski Trust Fund, and affordable housing being eliminated, cut in half permanently, and 3 immediate wins that were all around Medicaid expansion and health justice that happened through the budget process.